would you just be able to share with us kind of some of the story of some of the different projects that have taken off, particularly those projects that have been helped by lottery funding as well, would be really helpful.
Yeah, and that's probably an important phrase, I think, because none of what we do is paid for by the lottery. It is part of a sort of package of funding. So, in fact, you know, it's kind of a myth that you can go for lottery funding to fund something. You always have to show that you are going to do your part, you know, within it, and that's a financial commitment, or it's the way that your buildings are used and everything else. So we run different youth projects, which is our sort of focus for where we got our lottery funding from, and we are on our second lot of 5-year funding. So I think we're in year 8, which is an amazing thing. You know, our youth stuff, training young people to get jobs. I'm not answering your question very well. Let me give you the actual things. So we pitched for youth unemployment 8 years ago, was a very significant issue in Brighton. The other thing we noticed was that lots of schools, when we were saying how do we best help you as a school, they were sort of scratching their heads and saying, but the one group of people that nobody really works with are those young people who just lack in self-confidence. You know, there's things for kids who want to do sport, and there's things for smart, you know, intellectually sort of gifted kids, but just the kids who have got no friends, who are lonely, there isn't very much for them, and the school doesn't really know how to help them to be less lonely, or you know, less or more confident. So we wrote a bid around those two things. You know, how can we help decrease youth unemployment, and how can we help increase confidence in young people who lack it? And we put a framework around that of some drop-in youth clubs, after school homework clubs, and then this thing called Interwork, which is you can drop in and we can help you talk about career and help find work experience and help work on your CV and those sort of things. And we got that piece of funding for 5 years. The lottery liked us. We overshot on all of our targets, so then we went for a second lot, and they funded it again. But within that, probably, I don't know, maybe 20% or so of the costs, the church had to show that we were prepared to, you know, to not match funding, but it sort of showed that we were serious about it. You're not getting something for nothing out of it.
What has been your experience of applying for the lottery, and then also kind of the ongoing input from the lottery since applying and getting that funding? Yeah,
I realise that part of the tension for you guys as you talk about it is that this isn't going to be answered by my response now. But in terms of working with lots of funders, the lottery are some of the best. They're the most sort of forward-thinking, on the cutting edge of the way that they gather data and those kind of things. They're really flexible. If you want to pitch another idea, and this is how we want to show you the outcomes, they're up for that. There's other funders who, you know, give you a very tight. We just did something for a cafe, and we've had to, the amount of hours that we've had to put in on reporting how we used, it was just £15,000, but you almost thought, is it worth it? You know, but the lottery, they're at the head of the game in terms of understanding finance for charities or churches at a local level. So they know if it's too burdensome, either the process to get the money or the process to account for the money, and accounting for the money is very important, that's done right. But the way that you set your goals and you prove that you've set your, hit your goals, it is very fluid, and they're very understanding about when things change. You can imagine that most of that work that I just described to you has come to a crash and standstill in the last year. Again, they were super understanding, super helpful, because this is one of the main ways that charities are funded now. So they've been excellent. We have an area rep that we meet with, and she loves us, and we bring her in for a cup of tea and a chat, and she sits in the church. We talk about all kinds of things, and then sort of at the end of the conversation she says, I suppose we better talk about this grant. So we've built up a friendship with her, and so our experience of getting that money, of using it, of reporting back has been wholly positive.
That's really helpful. And what difference would you say that the lottery has made to those projects in terms of, if you were to envisage what the projects would have been like without that input from the lottery, and what it's been like with?
Yeah. Well, that funding sort of greased the wheels for so much of what we do. So the answer to your question is, we wouldn't be doing. I just don't know what we'd be doing in terms of our projects across the city if it wasn't for the lottery. It's not that they fund all of those things, but the other thing you have to realise is that other funders look at an organisation like One Church and they want to know, can you actually look after money well? Are you going to deliver on the things that you say to? Are you well organised? Are your health and safety and child protection policies all in place and everything? When you receive lottery funding, to everybody else, that is like almost like a card mark of they must have satisfied all of that stuff in order to get that funding. So it's not just that the lottery helped us to do some projects, it then helped further funding, and it helped our credence within the city. Nobody in Brighton Council, I hate to tell you, would have been impressed that we said, well, from a moral point of view, we turned it down. They'd have just thought, well, that's odd, because every charity across the city is. Now, and I realise there could be an argument that says we want to be different, and I would respect that. But I'm just telling you how it is from One Church's point of view, that because we said yes, that the council, the whole civic sector went, these guys are on the map. And wanted to work with us. So when we got, our 5-year grant, I think the first one was like £350,000. That's not a small amount of money, and the lottery want it to be known about. So we did a press release when we got that money. Suddenly, all of the youth services in Brighton are going, "Oh, great! It's great to have you guys on board. Come along to this meeting, come along to this thing." So it wasn't just the money; it put us in the marketplace alongside other youth services and other activities. And instead of the church being seen as this hokey little parochial thing that kind of sells stale biscuits and bad coffee to raise money for the steeple, suddenly we were invited into all of the normal meetings around healthcare and social care in the city, because we were on the map. So again, I fully appreciate the sensitivity around the issue, but I have to say, from our point of view, if we'd said no, we wouldn't be doing half of what we're doing. And now, that the income, probably the income from other funders, is bigger than what we get from the lottery. Lottery are no longer our biggest funders, but like I say, the lottery one got us a kind of foot in the door to be able to apply for other things. And it's funding follows funding. That's what, whenever you go to any seminar about fundraising, they always say to you. And it's because you can be trusted with funding that other funders, are more open to funding you.
Some people might have questions of how the lottery needs to be put onto different signs, or kind of how that needs to be advertised as such. With the kind of different expectations there at all?
I mean, they were pretty good about it. And this again is probably important for this conversation, where the lottery is funding a project the majority of the money, then they will want their logo somewhere on the bottom of a letterhead, or it's not going to be on your church signage or anything, because that's the broader thing. But if they pay for a cafe, they're not going to expect it on the cafe signage. We barely ever use it. We barely ever use it. If we are recruiting to positions that the lottery is paying for, then we have to run our job description and job spec past the lottery to make sure that they're happy. They've always been happy, even when we've talked about our faith and everything else. They're very understanding about faith. They want to work with churches more. It's one of their aims. But on the bottom of that job description and letter that's saying about this new job, it will have the lottery, because it will say funded by the lottery. If it's not funded by the lottery, you don't need to use that. And where it's ambiguous, you don't need to use it. So you can look on the One Church website. You can come to our buildings. You're not going to see you're not going to see the lottery symbol anywhere. So it's really where it is tied in with that. If you're advertising a job club that's paid for by the lottery, then it's absolutely right. and to have the integrity that says down the bottom, this was funded by the lottery.
Yeah. As you say, that can actually be a help in some ways as well, in other funders seeing that you're being supported by the lottery too.
Yeah.
You just mentioned about faith as well, and actually the lottery supporting that. There might be some people who have one or two concerns about the restrictions that the lottery might enforce on their funding applications, where there are certain lines, I believe, or I've seen concerns over funding religious activities. What's been your experience of that, and how they seem?
This is probably a much bigger conversation about theology and about missiology, really. But if the work that you're doing is essentially to get people to come to your church, then absolutely the lottery should not be funding that work. Why should they? If, however, there are 3 different job clubs or 3 different wellbeing projects, in Bognor, 2 of them are being funded by the lottery. Why shouldn't your project be funded by the lottery? As an integral part of the faith community that you are. Nobody's. It's not like the lottery want you to hush your headline that you are, here to build the kingdom of God. But some of that's just language. For me, if a young person in this town has their destiny changed because people thought they weren't worthy of a job and could never hold one down, but they are now, and their self-confidence is built, that is something that nods towards the building of the kingdom of God for me. But I shouldn't ask anybody else to pay for the attendance at my church. So it's having the integrity to go, if we're going to do like a wellbeing project, that really is what we want to do. And that is really what we're about. This isn't a backdoor evangelism thing. We're not ashamed of our faith. We believe that actually for people to know life in all its fullness, that will happen only if they're in relationship with God. You can still hold all of that stuff, but have the ability to go, there is a part of church life here which is funded this way, which does what it says on the tin. And if some of those people became part of the church, the lottery would have no problem with that. But if that's your goal for doing it, then pay for that yourself, and don't ask the lottery to pay for it. I think where you're saying, and that's again, churches could learn a lot of lessons, I think, from the charity sector. If you're going to go for some funding, you have to give justification of why you think, to use church language, why you think you're called to do it, and how you'll know if you've done it. And the church has always been very poor at actually some of that language. And it's not a bad thing to say, how do we know if we've been successful? Well, it's if it's just bums on seats on a Sunday, then I don't think that doesn't feel very biblical to me. That success is that there are less people who are lonely in our town. There are less people whose marriages are breaking up in our town. There are less people who are unemployed in our town. And when you can take those kind of goals and say, okay, we're going to apply for the lottery because we want 50 people to be healthier and more able to access other, activities because of our project. Then getting funding to achieve that, I think there's nothing wrong with it. Maybe 10, of those 50 people want to know more about the church, and that's all fine. And the lottery are absolutely fine with that. They're not naive. They know that we want to share our faith with people, but they can't be seen to fund the bit that's centered on faith.
If someone was to come up to you within your church community and was to express concerns about the lottery funding a project and kind of, the roots of the lottery and any morals behind a church backing that, what would your response be?
If I was being asked on my opinion and should we have a national lottery or not, I would say no. So that might sound like odd, well, how can you take the money if you don't think we should have it? The reality is we do have a national lottery, and in the 25 or 30 years, whatever it's been running, it has become one of the main sources of income for charity work across the UK. That is just the reality. And you can bury your head in the sand and say, I don't want that to be true. But now that the lottery, it's worth doing some investigation, because the lottery, they give out grants, not just on behalf of scratch cards and people who do the lottery each week. Because they've become so big and their organisation is so strong at the dissemination of funding, then there are funders who just give their money straight to the lottery. So it doesn't all come from scratch cards and lottery tickets. That's the first thing to know about. And we do live in an imperfect world that I mean, money itself is dirty in so many ways. And I know this is a bit of a cheap shot, but if we went through everybody's bank accounts and building society accounts and looked at what those institutions are using your money for right now, you might either be shocked or that you suspect that it happens, but actually, as long as I use my money that's in my bank in ways that honour God, then that's what the important bit is. However, if you've earned any interest on that money, or you've taken a loan from the bank to buy your house or anything else, you've become part of a system that I wish I could break down and we didn't have.
Yeah.
But we have to work with the imperfect situation we've got and redeem it. And I think we are redeeming something here. And when people say to me, well, you know, that's just like saying, well, let's take money from drug dealers. It's not, you know, it's more nuanced than that. It's more messy than that. But it is one of the fundamental ways that charity work is funded in this country. And if we want to be around the table for those discussions about the ethics and the health of it, you know, obviously, I think that more than whatever it is, 26p or something in the pound that goes to charitable thing, you know, if it could be more than that, that's an argument. But like I say, I don't play the lottery. I don't encourage people to play the lottery. But in an imperfect world where the monetary system is about the empire, our job is to bring the kingdom, you know, and that is redeeming something which is broken, which I might not approve of. But that said, I could bring into the room hundreds of people in the last 10 years, the last 8 years, who have been impacted by the work that we've done and are grateful for it. And suddenly you go, you know, kind of render unto Caesar and all of that stuff sort of springs to mind kind of theologically. So yeah, I do appreciate it's complex and it's difficult for some people. But I would say the journey of our church that it's been on with each new year is this kind of growing trust that we made the right choice.